Within the next few minutes, you're going to uncover a secret so dark, so violently suppressed by modern psychology, that it reshapes everything you think you know about female desire. This isn't just another surface-level analysis. It's the untold reality Freud himself feared to publish, a truth buried in private letters, censored by loyal disciples, and ultimately weaponized by those too afraid to face its full implications. By the end of this series, you'll understand why desire isn't what you've been sold, why men have been systematically misled, deceived by a narrative that flattens complexity into political correctness, and how this very knowledge, when fully grasped, hands you a kind of power so raw, so potent, that most would rather deny its existence than confront what it means. Let's begin with a story Freud never wanted the world to hear. In the late 19th century, a wealthy Viennese aristocrat named Anna von Lieben arrived at Freud's office. Wasn't just another bored housewife. Anna was tormented by violent emotional outbursts, crippled by uncontrollable urges, and suffocating in a loveless marriage that mirrored society's rigid expectations. At the time, Freud was still a young neurologist, not yet the father of psychoanalysis. But when he began delving into her subconscious, what he discovered would go on to shake his moral foundation to its core. Anna didn't merely desire intimacy. She craved in a way that defied logic, boundaries, and social order. Her mind was alive with fantasies of domination, humiliation, even acts bordering on violence. But the most unsettling revelation? These weren't isolated fantasies. According to Freud, they were far more common than anyone dared to admit. He confided in a personal letter, "The civilized woman is a facade. Beneath it lies a chaos of primal impulses, a hunger that dares not speak its name." This wasn't idle speculation. It was based on clinical observation, direct, unfiltered, and dangerous. And the deeper Freud went, the darker the revelations became. Consider the case of Dora, arguably Freud's most controversial patient. An intellectually sharp 8-year-old, Dora was sent to Freud by her father after she accused a close family friend of sexual assault. But as Freud pored over her behavior and emotional responses, a far more disturbing pattern emerged. Dora wasn't repulsed by the man's advances. She was aroused by them. Her hysteria didn't stem from trauma. It came from repression, from unfulfilled desire. She hated the man not because he dared to pursue her, but because he stopped the moment she pushed back. Freud called it the eroticization of refusal, a psychological phenomenon where rejection doesn't repel desire, but ignites it. The denial becomes the flame that fuels obsession. Now pause and ask yourself, what does this say about modern dating? How many men today are told that persistence is inherently predatory, that no must be taken as absolute? And yet across centuries of history and Freud's early work, the evidence suggests otherwise. Think of Cleopatra, who seduced Julius Caesar not through submission, but through artful resistance. Or the medieval troubadours, who devoted entire lifetimes writing songs to noble women they could never touch. The pattern is clear. Desire doesn't flourish in comfort. It thrives on the razor's edge of denial, on tension, the chase. The modern conversation around consent, though necessary, has been oversimplified. It overlooks the brutal, messy truth. Arousal isn't rational. The female psyche, Freud argued, isn't shaped for ease, but for conquest, for challenge, for dominance cloaked in surrender. But here's where things turn explosive. Freud's most incendiary theory is the one that led to backlash, censorship, even the burning of his text, was his claim that women envy male power. It's not in spite of their femininity, but precisely because of it. He called it penis envy, but the phrase has been grotesquely distorted over time. It wasn't about anatomy. It was about agency. Freud argued that the real battle in female sexuality wasn't biological, was psychological. Women, he believed, aren't taught to take pleasure. They're taught to receive it, to wait, to be chosen, not to choose. Their desire doesn't operate in isolation. It filters through masculine energy, through the experience of being pursued, overwhelmed, dominated, even consumed. This fundamental truth sheds light on a modern paradox. Why do some of the most empowered, highly educated women still find themselves fantasizing about submission? Why do billionaire romance novels top every female bestseller list? Why has the rise of feminism and career independence been paralleled by an explosion of BDSM communities and power exchange fantasies? It's not a contradiction, it's a consequence. Still skeptical? Let's move forward in time. In 1953, Alfred Kinsey, the father of modern sexology, embarked on a groundbreaking series of experiments. His goal? To measure women's physiological arousal with precision. What he found was deeply unsettling. Women's bodies, when monitored objectively, showed greater arousal in response to stories of forced seduction than to those depicting enthusiastic, mutual consent. Their bodies betrayed their stated beliefs. So why haven't you heard this? Because Kinsey buried the data, not because it lacked scientific merit, but because the implications were too dangerous. The findings clashed violently with the emerging feminist narrative of the mid-20th century. The truth didn't fit the story society wanted to tell. What does this mean for you? It means that everything you've been told to avoid the teasing, the push-pull dynamic, the hint of danger, aren't manipulative tricks. They're not social flaws. They're biological imperatives woven into the very structure of attraction. It means that the nice guy finishes last, not because he's nice, but because he's predictable, safe, emotionally linear. It means that women who strive for equality in the boardroom may still, at a subconscious level, crave inequality in the bedroom, crave the surrender they can't admit to in public, and most importantly, it means that the key to unlocking true desire isn't found in giving women what they say they want. It's in giving them what they can't admit they need. But this is only the beginning, because now we descend into the real-world consequences of ignoring Freud's warnings. Into the stories of men who did everything right, followed the rules, showed respect, believed in equality, and still lost everything. Welcome to the era of the sexless society. There is a silent epidemic sweeping across the modern world, a quiet plague of loneliness, confusion, and emotional withdrawal. It's not just affecting love lives, it's shaping entire generations of men who are giving up not just on dating, but on society itself. They've checked out, walked away. And here's the terrifying part. They have every reason to, because the rules, who were raised on rules of unwavering politeness, emotional availability, gentle respect, have turned against them. The very traits they were told women wanted have rendered them invisible. But make no mistake, this isn't just a recent cultural glitch. It's the long, inevitable result of ignoring the primal mechanics Freud laid bare more than a century ago. Let's go back. In 1908, Freud took on the case of a young man named Edward, a gifted attorney, intelligent, articulate, and financially secure. He was everything society held up as the ideal husband, yet he was paralyzed by what was then called neurasthenia, a fog of depression, lethargy, and sexual disinterest. Edward was the textbook good man. He did everything expected of him, and still his marriage collapsed. His wife didn't love him. She despised him. She mocked his gentleness, laughed at his sensitivity, and eventually abandoned him for a brutish factory worker with a criminal past. She mocked his weakness, flirted openly with other men, and eventually left him for a brutish factory worker with a criminal record. Freud's diagnosis: moral castration. Edward, like so many men shaped by the ideals of civility and restraint, had been conditioned to suppress his aggression, mute his dominance, and bury the primal edge of his masculinity. In doing so, he didn't just dull his passion, he erased his visibility in the eyes of women. He became not a partner, but a shadow. Fast forward to today, and the consequences of this psychological neutering have intensified. The average man under 30 is now 3 times more likely to be celibate than his father was at the same age, a staggering generational shift. And where courtship once involved real human connection, dating apps have now reduced it to a brutal numbers game. A meat grinder of superficial swipes, where the top 10% of men absorb nearly 90% of female attention. What does that mean for the rest? For the average man hoping that kindness and loyalty will suffice, they are being filtered out before a single Word is spoken, and the men who do succeed, they're not the ones who play fair. They're the ones who understand what Freud hinted at over a century ago, that female desire isn't guided by justice or equality. It isn't democratic. It is drawn above all else to intensity. Take, for instance, the infamous Tinder study conducted by the University of Oslo in 2018. The data was as ruthless as it was revealing. Women rated 85% of men as below average in attractiveness. It's not just meh, but entirely unworthy of interest. Even more striking, the study uncovered a brutal preference. Women would rather share an elite man than settle for a loyal, attentive nice guy who plays by the rules. Why? Because monotony is the death of desire. Freud labeled this phenomenon the boredom principle, the idea that all humans, but especially women in the domain of erotic attraction, are wired to seek out variance, novelty, and risk. The modern dating landscape, saturated with endless choices and gamified validation, has turned this principle into a high-stakes battleground. What was once a subtle psychological impulse has now become weaponized, and yet it gets darker. In the 1950s, psychologist John Money conducted a series of controversial experiments to explore gender and arousal. His findings were nothing short of shocking. When women were asked about what type of men they found attractive, they consistently reported a preference for kind, dependable, emotionally stable partners. But when their bodies were tested, measuring heart rate, pupil dilation, and skin, conductance an entirely different reality emerged. When shown images of powerful, dominant, even dangerous men, their physiological responses spiked. Their pupils widened, their pulses raced. Their skin betrayed their arousal, their bodies told the truth that social norms refused to allow them to speak. Just like Kinsey, John Money suppressed the data. Why? Because the implications would have shattered the emerging myth of the egalitarian relationship. But you don't need a lab to see this truth. Just look around. Why are dark romance novels filled with mafia bosses, brooding captors, and ruthless anti-heroes consistently topping the charts? Why has OnlyFans exploded not with worshipful attention toward nice guys, but with women paying to be humiliated and dominated by emotionally distant performers? Even in the world of politics, data shows women more often support authoritarian leaders, those who exude raw, unapologetic power over gentle, reformist figures who promise cooperation and equality. Freud had a name for this instinctual attraction. To danger, the thanatos affecta, deep, unconscious, pull toward destruction, chaos, and forbidden energy. Women aren't broken, they are wired, just as men are, by forces far older than civilization. But the men who deny this, who cling to sanitized ideals of courtship and fairness, are left stunned, isolated, scrolling endlessly through dating apps that yield nothing but silence. But here's the twist. This isn't women's fault, and blaming them misses the entire point. Freud's most incendiary and most misunderstood insight was this: women do not control their desires any more than men do. They're slaves to the same biological imperatives, driven by the same primal coding etched deep into the subconscious. The only real difference? Society grants women the luxury of hypocrisy. A man who dares to admit he desires a submissive woman is immediately condemned, mocked, shamed into silence. But a woman who secretly fantasizes about dominant, sexually powerful men, she's not just accepted, she's celebrated, so long as she cloaks her truths in socially approved language. Take, for example, the infamous Stanford Prison experiment of 1971. While officially designed to examine the psychological effects of perceived power, what was quietly ignored in every academic report was the behavior of the female researchers. Outwardly, they condemned the guards' cruelty. They protested the escalating aggression. But behind closed doors, many were visibly aroused by the same displays of dominance they publicly criticized. The attraction was unmistakable, even if no one dared to put it in print. And this isn't an isolated phenomenon. In Nazi Germany, as the regime marched forward with terror and control, Countless women, despite claiming to detest fascism, threw themselves at SS officers. These were not passive victims of a political system. They were willing participants in the erotic pageantry of power. Why? Freud had a chilling explanation. The erotic mind has no conscience. Desire doesn't follow ethics. It doesn't obey ideology. It answers only to tension, polarity, and unconscious drives that morality can't touch. So what now? Do men have to become monsters to be desired? Must they mimic cruelty to ignite passion? No, the answer isn't brutality, it's game. Not deception, but understanding. It's not domination for its own sake, but the mastery of dynamics. The men who thrive in today's chaotic sexual landscape aren't the ones who reject female nature or vilify it. They're the ones who decode it, who recognize that desire isn't born from obedience. It's born from challenge, from unpredictability, from a sense of earned magnetism, because attraction isn't about pleasing her. It's about awakening her. But even this revelation is just the beginning. Now we dive deeper, beyond social cues and biological instinct, into the psychological warfare of modern dating. A war not fought with tanks or missiles, but with ideologies, shifting gender norms, and the lies women have been taught to believe in, to tell themselves, whether she wants to admit it or not. There is a war being waged against men, not with physical violence, but with words, with laws, with a cultural framework designed to strip men of their natural instincts. The battlefield? Dating the casualties? Millions of men confused, disoriented, ashamed, who no longer understand what's expected of them. Or worse, who've been intentionally misled about what women actually want. This isn't a random cultural shift. It's a deliberate dismantling of the sexual hierarchy, one that Freud himself warned would end in mass male disillusionment. The most terrifying part? It's working. Let's begin with a story you won't find in any psychology textbook in 1927. Wilhelm Reich, brilliant young psychologist, and once Freud's protege, launched a daring and dangerous project. He conducted a series of clandestine interviews with working-class women in Berlin. His goal? To strip away social pretense and expose the truth about what women genuinely desired in a man. The findings were incendiary. So disruptive, in fact, that Reich's work was eventually burned by the Nazis. Why? Because what he discovered flew in the face of the emerging egalitarian narrative. These women weren't longing for equality. They wanted polarity. They craved men who were stronger than them, more decisive than them, men who could take control and, more importantly, would. One woman's confession remains unforgettable. Don't want to be his friend. I want to be his exception. Fast forward to today, the modern man has been systematically gaslit, conditioned to believe that masculinity is a problem, that dominance is a form of abuse, that expressing confidence is an act of violence. He's been told that if he just listens more, gives more, yields more, he'll finally earn her love. And yet the data tells a different story. A 2020 study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology revealed something striking. Women were significantly more likely to experience deep enjoyment with partners who displayed assertiveness and even shades of aggression in bed. Why? It's not because they were seeking pain or humiliation, but because passion demands friction. Because, as Freud so precisely stated, desire is born not from comfort, but from the primal tension between surrender and conquest. It's a dynamic that ignites chemistry, that fuels the fire of intimacy. But here's where it turns dark. The very society that loudly condemns male dominance in public is the same one that, in practice, rewards it behind closed doors. The contradiction is everywhere you look. Consider the enduring appeal of the bad boy trope in Hollywood: men who defy authority, ignore social norms, break boundaries with ease, and yet somehow always win the affection of the beautiful, desirable woman. It's not coincidence. It's conditioning. Or turn your attention to the music industry. Female artists belt out lyrics about toxic, unavailable men they can't quit, romanticizing heartbreak and chaos. And then there's the legal system, divorce courts that systematically drain the kind, respectful man of his assets, while the aloof, dominant ex walks away emotionally and financially intact. This isn't merely hypocrisy. It's human nature playing out on a stage of societal denial. Freud saw the writing on the wall a century ago when he warned, "Civilization will demand that men neuter themselves and then wonder why women lose interest." Now let's bring it closer to home with the story of Michael, a 32-year-old, an engineer who came to me for help just last year. On paper, Michael was the modern dream. Feminist, emotionally available, kind to a fault. He cooked for his girlfriend, planned thoughtful surprises, celebrated her wins, and supported her career. Without hesitation, and then she left him. Why? Because despite his unwavering commitment, he failed to ignite emotion. He was safe, predictable, boring. Her final words were like a dagger. "I love you, but I'm not in love with you." Sound familiar? That line has become the anthem of countless breakups. This isn't anecdotal, it's epidemic. It all stems from a principle Freud described long ago, the hedonic treadmill. Humans adapt rapidly to comfort, to predictability, but they remain obsessed with novelty, with challenge, in the realm of romantic desire. Giving a woman everything she says she wants isn't a recipe for devotion. It's a blueprint for indifference. Because desire isn't sustained by fulfillment. It thrives in pursuit. Still skeptical? Let's talk about dread. In the 1970s, renowned anthropologist David Buss conducted a global study on mate retention strategies. Among his most controversial discoveries was this: women were most attracted to men who were desired by other women, and least attracted to those who were always available. This pattern wasn't cultural, it was universal. From hunter-gatherer tribes to high-powered Wall Street firms, the rule held steady. The moment a man makes a woman the center of his life, the moment he sacrifices his purpose for her presence, she begins to lose respect. Attraction. Freud referred to this as the scarcity principle, the paradox that attention, to have value, must be earned, not freely handed over. Unreciprocated worship doesn't increase desire, it kills it. So what's the solution? Should men become cold, manipulative, emotionally absent? No. The real answer is frame control, a term not of deceit, but of understanding. The men who succeed in this confusing new era of relationships aren't the ones who chase women desperately. They're the ones who pull, who remain grounded in purpose, who set the emotional tone instead of reacting to it because they know a timeless truth. Attraction isn't sparked by logic. It's triggered in the mind, the body, the unconscious. Women may say they want a good listener, but they respond to the man who leads. They recognize that confidence isn't arrogance, it's indifference. The kind of cool detachment that speaks louder than compliments, more powerful than pleading. And now, this is where we're going nuclear. Into the one Freudian secret that rewires female attraction at the most primal level. Into the lie society relentlessly tells men to keep them passive, agreeable, and docile. And into Freud's ultimate power move, the one that flips the script and forces women to chase. Because hidden beneath layers of modern narratives and social conditioning, there lies a force, a psychological current buried deep within the female psyche. It's not soft, it's not polite. It's not about Instagram aesthetics or dating app banter. It's raw, ruthless, and ancient. An instinct so powerful that once you grasp it, you will never again ask yourself why she picked him over you. This is not about looks, it's not about money. It's not even about status. This is about something far more dangerous. Something almost forbidden. It's the subconscious trigger of surrender, that moment when logic dissolves. Attraction emerges not from choice, but from compulsion. Freud discovered this force in the darkest corners of his most controversial work. So ahead of its time, that modern psychology chose to bury it rather than confront it. Yet the men who do understand this mechanism, who tap into it not manipulatively, but knowingly, they wield it with precision like a blade. Let me tell you about a man history forgot. In 1936, a Hungarian psychoanalyst named Sándor Ferenczi, Freud's most radical protege, conducted an experiment so explosive, so disruptive, that his colleagues demanded it be erased. Hidden, silenced, he asked women to listen to 2 audio recordings of male voices. The first voice was gentle, polite, endlessly accommodating. The second, deep, slow, firm, utterly unapologetic, commanding. The result was staggering. 87% of the women exhibited involuntary physiological signs of arousal, but only to the second voice. Their pupils dilated. Their breathing changed. Their heart rates elevated. And yet, when asked why, most had no explanation. Some denied their response altogether. One even claimed to hate the second voice, while her body clearly told a different story. The conclusion: the female unconscious does not want to be asked. It wants to be taken. Not in a literal violent sense, but in the psychological, emotional space where tension and polarity reign. This isn't speculation. It's biology. Modern neuroscience has confirmed Freud's theory with clinical precision. In 2019, a UCLA fMRI study scanned female brains while showing them different types of male faces. The smiling, kind, emotionally available men? Nothing. No activation in their reward centers. But the disapproving, serious, even brooding faces, their nucleus accumbens, the brain's pleasure switch, lit up like a casino slot machine on a winning streak. Freud called this strange, counterintuitive phenomenon the defiance paradox. The more a woman consciously resists dominance, the more her deeper instincts reward. Surrender to it. Now pause and consider your own life. How many times have you seen a woman friend-zone a respectful, attentive man only to crawl back to an ex who mistreated her? How often have you watched a smart, successful, independent woman obsess over a guy who gives her nothing but chaos and inconsistency? This isn't self-sabotage. It isn't low self-esteem. It's instinct, and it leads us to one of humanity's oldest, most brutal survival truths. Women have been evolutionarily programmed to test the strength of men, not out of malice, but necessity. Because in the unforgiving crucible of ancient life, a man who was weak didn't just fail, he died. So did his partner. So when a woman pushes, provokes, or withdraws, it's not always assessment. And if a man folds under that pressure, if he trades strength for constant approval, he fails that ancient test. Because weakness, once upon a time, meant extinction. Every time she pushes you away, it isn't out of malice, it's to see if you'll stand firm. Every time she picks a fight over something trivial, she's not trying to start a war. She's checking your emotional control. She isn't being cruel. She's filtering. Testing the hidden strength behind the smile, the resolve beneath the surface. And most men, they fail. Not because they're weak, but because they don't even realize they were being tested in the first place. But this is where it gets real. In 1951, the renowned psychologist Erik Erikson conducted a now-suppressed study on the psychological dynamics within marriage. His findings, considered too disruptive for mainstream acceptance, revealed something chilling yet undeniable. In every long-term heterosexual relationship, an unspoken hierarchy of power existed. In the moment a man surrendered his position as the psychological anchor, the woman's respect quietly dissolved, not because she was cruel, not because she didn't love him, because her biology read his submission as a form of genetic betrayal. One anonymous wife said it best in a confession that struck like lightning. I begged him to be more vulnerable. Then, when he was, I couldn't look at him the same way. This is the grand lie of modern dating culture. Women publicly advocate for emotional equality, yet biologically crave asymmetry. They say they want a man who shares his feelings, who opens up, but their deepest attraction is triggered not by emotional transparency, but by emotional scarcity. Freud's darkest, most controversial insight was this: the feminine soul despises what it begs for. So what's the answer? Should a man become emotionally detached, cold-hearted, a manipulator playing games? No, the answer isn't cruelty. It's polarity. The men who understand the truth behind female desire don't hate women, they understand them. They realize that true masculinity has nothing to do with domination and everything to do with creating space for surrender. Don't scream for respect. They command it not through intimidation, but by embodying unshakable presence. So how do you apply this? Let's break it down into 3 strategies, rooted in psychology and supported by decades of clinical observation. 1. The silent strategy. When she tests you and she will, the wrong response is to argue, explain, or chase validation. 8. Correct move? Say nothing. Remain calm. Be still. Freud once noted that the female mind fills silence with emotional meaning. The more you justify yourself, the less she feels. The less you explain, the more she chases the explanation. Silence becomes power. 2. The decisive imperative, contrary to what society suggests. Most women don't want shared decision-making, they want direction. A 2022 study in the Journal of Social, Psychological, Personality Science found that women reported significantly greater attraction to men who took initiative, who made plans, not suggestions. Not because women are submissive, but because decisive action is a display of cognitive dominance. And dominance, when combined with emotional grounding, is erotically magnetic. 3. The reward-punishment loop. This isn't manipulation. Behavioral conditioning. When her actions align with your standards and values, reward her with genuine attention, affection, and presence. But when her behavior deviates or crosses boundaries, withdraw your energy not to punish, but to signal. Natural consequence. Freud's case studies consistently revealed that women only value a man's attention when it isn't guaranteed, when it must be earned. But this is merely the foundation, because the final secret, the one insight that ties together all of Freud's controversial and buried work is this: female desire was never about the woman, it was always about you. The moment you place her on a pedestal, treat her as the prize you've already lost. But the moment you unapologetically live by your own code, move with purpose, and prioritize your mission over approval, she starts chasing you. This is the ultimate inversion, the grand reveal. The knowledge in its purest form. Type liberate in the comments if you're ready to wield this knowledge, because you were never powerless, you were just misled. Now go and act accordingly.